My name is Interrogator Militant Severin Hale of the Ordo Malleus, and at 0347 hours ship time, I heard a bell toll 13 times through perfect vacuum. The sound resonated through ceramite and blessed steel, through the machine spirits of the inquisitorial cutter Sanctifier's warrant, vibrating in my very bones while every Auspex reading confirmed 0 acoustic pressure. 13 impossible tolls where sound cannot exist, each phantom strike making my teeth ache like prayer and frostbloom inside my helmet lens despite regulated atmosphere. This is my mission log as we approach Space Hulk Maledicta Volaris, a grave weld of pilgrim barges and cathedral ships locked in decay vector toward the Vespera Theta Forge orbitals. With each bell toll, personnel vanished from Vox manifests across the sector, not killed, but erased from all records, as if they never drew breath. On Forge worlds, throughout the system, rites of ignition failed as machine spirits forgot sacred sequences. A countdown appeared simultaneously on every chronometer, 6, 7, 8, 9, cycling backward in stuttering repetition, carved in frost that should not form in climate-controlled spaces. Inquisitor Varro stood at the observation dome, his weathered face reflecting sickly phosphorescence bleeding from the Hulk's cathedral spires. Acoustic anomaly confirmed, he said with clinical calm, though his knuckles whitened against his rosette. Magos errant Threnody 9 muttered Binharik that tasted like copper filings, his hooded cranial lattice clicking as scrap codes scrolled across optical sensors. Fourfold phase lock sought, he intoned, mechadendrites writhing in distress. Sister Dialogue's Sarah clutched her rosarius until blood beaded beneath gauntlets, lips moving in fractured canticle, where syllables arrived out of sequence. Skitari Alpha 3X Helion deployed his maniple in overlapping fire patterns, their red optics switching to reddy white as carbines lifted in precise 90-degree arcs. The Tempestus Scions checked gravlines and knee couplers with mechanical efficiency, breathing the catechism of pressure and seal. Brother Sergeant Malchus of the Redemptors stood like a buttress behind us, helm lenses dead black, palm resting on his bolter stock as if it were a reliquary. Boarding protocols by the numbers, I ordered, falling back on military procedure as reality bent around us. The familiar rhythm of preparation provided anchor against wrongness seeping through our hull. Temperature readings fluctuated without cause. Humidity manifested as glittering ice crystals forming spiral patterns that hurt to perceive directly, each one unique, yet following mathematical progressions that should not exist. The Hulk turned slowly in the void, like a diseased prayer wheel, its fusion of sacred architecture and corrupted metal casting shadows that moved against the light. Boarding torches kissed rust-scabbed flanks with blue-white fury, but where superheated plasma should scream against adamant, only whispers emerged, the sound of something vast drawing breath in spaces between heartbeats. "Mag locks secure," reported Scion Tertius Kane, voice tight with professional calm. "Hull breach achieved. Atmospheric readings inconsistent, sir. Pressure normal, oxygen present, but spectrographic analysis suggests we're breathing vacuum." The bell tolled again, not heard but felt, pressure existing in the gap between existence and void. This time, 12 tolls, the countdown accelerating. With each phantom strike, my chronometer display flickered, 6, 7, 8, 9, then backward, marking time until something that should never ring would toll across the galaxy. Docking claws extended with vapor that glittered around our hull like dust in chapel light. When locks bit, something breathed across the team net. Not a word, but the shape a word would take if air were allowed to live between us. My retinal slate flickered, displaying uninvited script in high Gothic. Silentium tenet, ut audiatur, keep silence, that he may be heard. The phrase appeared in no ecclesiarchy lexicon, yet felt familiar as childhood prayers. Movement detected, Malchus reported, bolt pistol tracking across emptiness. No visual confirmation, thermal negative, motion sensors registering absence. I stepped toward the cycling hatch, mag boots clanking against deck plating that rang with harmonics no metal should produce. The air tasted of old blood and ozone, carried the metallic tang of coins heated in flame. Behind us, the Sanctifier's warrant held position, but frost already formed on her hull, where exhaust vents should burn clear. The hatch indicator cycled through colours that meant nothing in any navy I'd served. Varro turned his rosette like a coin and looked at me through his visor. "Your log, Hale." I thumbed the recording rune. "Mission time 0, entry 1. We came to knock at a coffin that welded other coffins to itself and learned the dead ring their own requiem." The lock thumped. The phrase wrote itself across my retinal slate in sickly lumen gold. Letters scored as if by stylus pressed from behind my eyes. "Keep silence, that he may be heard." The hatch opened on a cathedral nave in hard vacuum, where incense burned in impossible flame. We crossed the threshold into the macro-basilica vox eterna, where corpses of pilgrims drifted in hard vacuum, while incense burned in impossible flame. The cathedral stretched beyond Auspec's range, its nave disappearing into frost-lit darkness that registered as both empty space and breathable atmosphere on our instruments. I ordered standard breach protocol, overlapping fields of fire, tethered advance, mag clamp secure, while reality bent around us like heated metal. The pilgrims had died in devotional postures, hands clasped in final prayer while their mouths gaped empty. Not torn or cut, the tongues had been excised with surgical precision, leaving cauterized stumps that wept crystalline tears in the void. Rosary beads threaded through, eye sockets and nasal cavities in patterns that made my skull ache with geometric wrongness. Each corpse bore the same modification: silver wire drawn through jawbone holes where speech once lived. "Fire team advance by sectors," I commanded, falling into the rhythm of cleared spaces and tactical movement. Scion Caney swept left with his hellgun, thermal scope painting red ghosts across my visor display. Brother Sergeant Malchus took rear guard at the transept, a Gothic statue that remembered war. Skitari Alpha 3X Helion deployed his maniple in staggered formation, red optics switching to ready white as galvanic rifles hummed with charge. Threnody 9 extended mechadendrites toward a half-dead cogitator bank, its machine spirit flickering with dying lumens. Binary cant flowed between them, but responses arrived in retrograde sequence, data streams flowing backward through causality. "Fourfold phase lock sought," the cogitator wheezed through vox grills clogged with ice. "Coordinates logged in negative space, arrival imminent since yesterday." The mosaics covering cathedral walls depicted saints with familiar faces but wrong proportions. The Aquila stretched into impossible geometries, its wings folded through dimensions that hurt to perceive directly. Each tessera caught light from nowhere, casting shadows inward rather than away. Numbers appeared in grout between tiles, 6, 7, 8, and 9, etched in rust that bloomed fresh as I watched. The quartered circle repeated in ironwork along pews and railings, in window tracery, in the corroded filigree of broken altars. Environmental hazards escalated with each step. Magnetic eddies tugged sideways at our boots with irregular rhythm, gravity stuttering in time with the countdown pulsing across every chronometer. Humidity manifested as glittering ice crystals that fell upward, each one perfect and unique, forming spirals that converged on the high altar like frozen prayers seeking absolution. Sister Dialogus Sarah approached a bronze plaque marking a pilgrim's final devotion. The inscription appeared standard, the prayer of ignition, but vowels were missing, whole lines erased, so meaning fell through gaps. When she touched the plaque to clear frost, letters flowed like molten gold beneath her gauntlet, rearranging into script shaped around her throat. "Keep silence, that he may be heard," she said. Then lower, not her voice. "Keep silence, that he may enter." She jerked back hard enough to make her tether sing. Servo skulls the size of children drifted in ritual formation around nave pillars, bone housings carved with angular symbols that shifted when observed. They clicked out the countdown with silver clappers where tongues should be. Click, pause, click, pause, click, pause, click. Then silence where the ninth beat belonged. Each skull's empty sockets tracked our movement with attention that belonged to something else. The cathedral's acoustics defied physics. Our footsteps produced no echo. Yet whispers emerged from empty air, fragments of canticles sung in four-part harmony by voices that belonged to no one present. Words arrived out of sequence, syllables scattered across minutes, but my mind assembled them against my will into phrases that tasted of copper and old incense. External vox crackled with telemetry from the sanctifier's warrant. Autoplaying comms files contained psalms chanted backward, their percussive pauses marking the countdown sequence. Static resolved into breathing, not our breathing, but the collective inhalation of something vast preparing to speak. Hull breach detected in Sector 7, Caney reported, voice tight with professional tension. No explosive decompression, no atmospheric loss. It's as if the breach was always there, and we're just now remembering it. Threnody 9's optical sensors whirred as he processed impossible data streams. No spheric disturbance confirmed. Machine spirits are singing. Binary cant arranged in harmonic progressions that shouldn't produce melody, yet they're trying to teach me a song I already know but have never heard. The nave's great doors stood 300 meters ahead, wrought from black adamant and sealed with locks that resembled frozen screams. As we advanced, condensation dripped upward from deck plating. Incense ash fell sideways as gravity followed different laws. The air tasted of hot coins and vinegar, carried metallic tang that made teeth ache like prayer. My suit mic registered sound that belonged to none of us, a collective inhalation that preceded words never spoken. The breath held for exactly 9 seconds, then released as pressure that made frost bloom inside our helmets. In that pause between inhale and whisper, I understood we weren't just witnessing an anomaly. We were becoming part of its resonance chamber. The countdown reached 6 to 7 to 8 and stuttered, waiting. The doors began to part without mechanism, opening on darkness that breathed back. The doors parted sideways, space folding against its own geometry, as we entered a sanctum that breathed with malevolent patience. The chamber defied measurement, walls curved inward yet felt vast, ceiling pressed low yet stretched beyond Auspec's range. At its heart stood a reliquary of black glass and silver filigree, housing the skull of what bronze plaques identified as the silent saint whose sermon fills the spaces between. The skull lacked its mandible. Where tongue should rest, a silver clapper had been grafted with surgical precision, its surface etched with hexagrammic wards that resolved into inversions when observed directly. The clapper moved with no wind, ticking against empty palate in rhythm that made my teeth ache like prayer. Perimeter establishment by the numbers, I commanded, falling back on military protocol as reality bent around us. Brother Sergeant Malchus positioned himself beneath processional banners depicting saints with sewn mouths and iron bells for faces, bolt pistol tracking across emptiness that registered as both void and breathable atmosphere. Tempestus scions deployed in overlapping fire sectors, mag clamping to deck plating that rang with harmonics no metal should produce. Skitari Alpha 3X Helion's maniple fanned outward along corridors that kinked like broken fingers, galvanic rifles humming with charge as red optics switched to ready white. Their movements followed the countdown's cadence, 6, 7, 8, 9, boot magnets clicking against deck seams that appeared and vanished with each step. Sister Dialogue Serra approached with auspex extended, scanner beams painting the reliquary in amber light that seemed to bend around the skull rather than illuminate it. Liturgical analysis confirms sanctification, she reported, voice tight with controlled unease. But marginalia has been overwritten. Her stylus trembled as she traced invisible letters on bronze plaques. Original text reads, "Blessed is he who speaks truth," but beneath. She paused, breath fogging her visor. "Hush, for the one who is for has no mouth. He borrows." Threnody 9 extended mechadendrites toward the reliquary, sensor arrays detecting energy signatures that registered as both present and absent. Low-frequency null waves confirmed, he intoned through vox grills that clicked with binary cant. Measurable only by effect. Observe the frost ferns. Crystalline formations bloomed along chamber walls, each frond bending toward the skull as if drawn by impossible magnetism. The patterns followed mathematical progressions that hurt to perceive. Spirals within spirals, quartered circles intersected by radii that refused to converge. Numbers appeared in the frost, 6 to 7 to 8 to 9, etched deep enough to catch light from nowhere and cast shadows inward. Environmental hazards escalated with each heartbeat. Cold became a thinking entity, seeping through armor joints rather than blowing with wind, carrying metallic taste that made saliva thick as mercury. Humidity manifested as glittering ice crystals that fell upward, each drop perfect and unique, forming geometric shapes that hovered like frozen screams. Servo skulls the size of children drifted in ritual circles around the reliquary, chained with silver links that sang with harmonic frequency. They clicked out the countdown with bone clappers, empty sockets tracking our movement with attention that belonged to something else. Each skull bore carved numerals worn smooth by time, but undeniably present. Hull breach expanding, reported Scion Tertius Kane, voice tight with professional calm. No atmospheric loss, but spaces folding. Doors that should open inward are swinging sideways. Corridors we cleared 10 minutes ago now lead to chambers that weren't there before. The reliquary pulsed with its own heartbeat, black glass warming to blood temperature despite the sanctum's killing cold. Inside the skull, shadows moved with purpose, coiling around the silver clapper like smoke given weight and intention. The clapper's engravings resolved under my lamp, protective sigils twisted into patterns that invited rather than warded. Every line a door opened under the guise of a barrier. My chronometer display flickered, 6 to 7, 8 to 9, then backward, marking time until something that should never ring would toll across the galaxy. With each phantom tick, frost bloomed inside my helmet lens, forming patterns that resembled musical notation written in script I couldn't read, but somehow understood. The skull's silver clapper moved once, truly silent, producing no sound, yet creating pressure waves that registered on our instruments as negative acoustic energy. The absence struck harder than sound could have, running through us like bolt rounds through paper. Sister Sarah's vox died mid-canticle, words falling from her mouth in wrong sequence. "Emperor, preserve us from," she began, but her voice skipped syllables corresponding to the countdown. "In the name of his, the third, 5, 10,000 names." Her breath never reached 7, leaping over 8 and 9, as if those numbers were holes in the floor she'd known since birth to step around. Frost bloomed in the air before her, not on her visor but in space between faceplate and reliquary. It extruded from her breath as 4 distinct geometries, a blade-thin wedge that made my gums ache, a curl like seed pod rot caught mid-opening, a lattice of angles that refused to repeat, a filament so fine it was almost pleasure to observe. They rotated slowly, facing the silver tongue, as flowers might face a sun they shouldn't know. "Movement detected beyond the reliquary," Malchus reported, bolt pistol tracking across emptiness. "Thermal negative, motion sensors registering the shape of absence moving with purpose." The silver clapper struck empty pallet once more, and this time the silence had weight, pressing against our armor like deep water, making bones sing with harmonic frequency that tasted of copper prayers and old incense. In that moment of perfect quiet, I understood we weren't just witnessing the silent saint's reliquary. We were standing inside its mouth, and something vast was preparing to speak through borrowed tongues. Somewhere deep in the sanctum, massive bolts began to unlatch in cadence that almost made sense. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th waited for our silence. Gravity surged like a hymn sung in wrong keys, tilting floors beneath us in stuttering pulses that matched the countdown jittering across every chronometer. 6, 7, 8, 9. each phantom beat making deck plating ring with harmonics no adamant should produce. My mag boots clamped hard enough to send vibrations through shinbone, while condensation dripped upward from surfaces that registered as both horizontal and vertical on Auspex readings. Anchor protocols, immediate deployment, I commanded, falling back on military procedure as reality misbehaved around us. Tempestus scions locked tether lines with mechanical precision while Skitari Alpha 3X Hellion projected advanced routes through augmented reality that flickered between possible and impossible geometries. His maniple fanned outward along corridors that kinked like broken fingers, galvanic rifles humming with charge as red optics switched to reddy white. Brother Sergeant Malchus braced against a Gothic pillar carved with quartered circles, ceramite greaves scoring filigree that shredded like lace. The processional banners lining sanctum walls depicted saints with familiar faces but wrong proportions, mouths sewn shut with silver thread, replaced by iron bells that hung where tongues should rest. Each banner caught light from nowhere, casting shadows that moved against illumination, while gravity decided where down should be and changed its mind. Gravitational disturbance confirmed, Malchus reported through Vox that crackled with interference shaped like whispers. Something's pulling at us, from directions that don't exist on any tactical grid. His voice carried the tight control of a warrior feeling reality slip beneath his boots. Threnody 9's mechadendrites writhed as they interfaced with sanctum cogitators, receiving data streams that flowed backward through causality. Ship-wide noospheric intention detected, he intoned through Vox grills clogged with ice crystals. Not data transmission, but will itself, something dragging on machine spirits like wet cloth through sacred oils. Gravimetric hymn at 6.789 Hz. The null waves are modulating local spacetime. Environmental hazards escalated beyond normal parameters. Cold seeped through armor joints with predatory patience, carrying metallic taste that made teeth ache like prayer. The pilgrim corpses throughout the sanctum had ossified in bell harmonic patterns. Ribs fused into resonant chambers while spinal columns curved into clappers that would never strike. Their empty eye sockets tracked our movement with attention that belonged to something else. Sister Dialogus Sarah approached a bronze memorial plaque, stylus trembling as she traced inscriptions that rearranged themselves beneath her touch. Canonical verse structure confirmed, but syntax is folding. Words arrive out of sequence, yet meaning assembles itself in my mind against my will. She stepped back hard enough to make her tether sing. The text now reads, "Keep silence, that he may enter through borrowed mouths." My chronometer display flickered with countdown acceleration. 6 hours remaining instead of 9. The cycle compressing with each iteration as something vast calculated optimal resonance frequency. Threnody external telemetry, I ordered, fighting to maintain footing as the floor bucked beneath us. The Hulk is brushing micro-asteroids with no impact sound, only the absence where sound should be, he reported, optical sensors whirring. External Vox relays are picking up hymn fragments from across the orbital network. The bell's influence is bleeding through. Communication systems. If the next toll propagates through Vox networks, it will ring every receiver in system simultaneously. The stakes settled across my shoulders like a cloak soaked in oil. Catastrophic resonance cascade. Every Vox in the system becoming a bell mouth hungering for a clapper. The massive warded door at the sanctum's far end began to unlatch one bolt at a time, each release accompanied by the sound of something vast drawing breath in spaces between heartbeats. The bolts were crafted from materials that registered as both adamant and void, their surfaces etched with protective sigils that twisted into invitations when observed directly. Brother Sergeant Malchus suddenly staggered, clutching his helm with both gauntlets. "Malchus, report!" I voxed, but he tore the helmet free with violent motion, blood trickling from his nose as his scarred face went pale. The breach should have been catastrophic in hard vacuum. Instead, no air left his lungs, no frost took his eyes. "It spoke my true name," he whispered, voice thick with controlled terror. "Not the name on any record or roster. but the one my mother gave me before she bled out. The one I've never shared with anyone, not even in confession. His eyes fixed on the reliquary with recognition that tasted of copper prayers. How does it know what I've forgotten? The reliquary pulsed with its own heartbeat, black glass warming to blood temperature despite the sanctum's killing cold. Inside the skull, shadows coiled around the silver clapper like smoke given weight and intention, forming patterns that resembled the countdown sequence rendered in 3 dimensions. External reports flooded the command net, orbital traffic drifting into formation without pilot input. Forge World machine spirits singing canticles in 4-part harmony. Chronometers skipping the same seconds simultaneously across multiple worlds. The 4th bolt fell with weight that pressed against our armor like deep water. The 5th considered us with terrible patience, then began to unlatch with tenderness that was cruelty. Something in the darkness beyond drew breath that lasted exactly 9 seconds, then released as pressure that made reality fold around us like heated metal. The door began to open on spaces that existed in negative mathematics, and I realized we weren't just witnessing an anomaly, we were becoming part of its resonance chamber, waiting for our silence to complete the bell's purpose. The warded door exhaled like a dying lung and opened on impossibility. A colossal bell of black adamant suspended over a shaft that plunged into frostlit darkness beyond Auspec's range. The bell possessed no clapper. Instead, 4 pylons surrounded it in perfect quartered formation, each rising like heretic spires from cathedral ruins, their surfaces etched with sigils that disguise sins as virtues, martial ardor masking wrath, fecund mercy concealing decay, esoteric truth hiding change, exquisite discipline veiling excess. "Emperor, preserve us," Sister Dialogus Sarah whispered, her voice tight with controlled dread. "It's a null cloche." Threnody 9's optical sensors whirred as mechadendrites extended toward the nearest pylon, receiving data streams that flowed backward through causality. "Archaeomechanicum designation confirmed," he intoned through vox grills that clicked with distressed binary cant. "A machine that cancels sound by devouring the interval where sound would exist. It doesn't ring, it omits, leaving only effect. The screaming is reality filling the absence our bodies perceive." Environmental impossibility escalated beyond normal parameters. Humidity beaded on adamant despite hard vacuum, perspiration from something that never breathed yet existed in the spaces between exhalation and word. The air tasted of hot coins and vinegar threaded with old incense, carried metallic tang that made saliva thick as mercury, while teeth ached with harmonic frequency. "Standard breach protocol," I commanded, falling back on military procedure as reality bent around us. Perimeter establishment by sectors, overlapping fields of fire. Brother Sergeant Malchus positioned himself beneath processional banners depicting saints with iron bells for mouths, bolt pistol tracking across emptiness that breathed with malevolent patience. Tempestus scions deployed in staggered formation, hellguns humming with charge, as thermal scopes painted red ghosts across my visor display. The bell moved without moving, existing in multiple positions simultaneously as my perception struggled to contain its geometry. Frost bloomed along chamber walls in fernwork patterns that crawled toward the bell like pilgrim hands, each frond bending with impossible magnetism toward the absent clapper that would never strike. "Gravitational disturbance confirmed," reported Scion Tertius Caney, voice tight with professional calm. "The bell is pulling at us from directions that don't exist on any tactical grid." His boot crossed the quartered circle sigil etched into deck plating around the bell's base with metallic click that produced no echo. His Vox ID blinked once on my tactical display, Kane, T, then erased itself letter by letter until only emptiness remained. His body froze mid-step, ceramite armor gleaming with condensation that beaded upward, breath fogging his visor in patterns that matched the countdown sequence. He waited to complete a syllable that would never come, mouth open behind faceplate, existing in quantum superposition between word and silence. "Caney, respond," I voxed, but the command fell into absence, where his name used to be. Supply manifests shuffled on the command net, subtracting rations by one, then correcting themselves, editing their own audit logs so they had never been wrong. The bell had claimed its first offering, teaching us the rules of its hunger through demonstration rather than explanation. The pylons illuminated with 4 distinct hues that had no names in any spectrum we'd catalogued. Blood crimson that smelled of iron and old victory, sickly green gold slick with the sweetness of rot, cold azure shot through with white motes like distant suns, and pale pearl sheen that promised perfection and bled pleasure from the eyes. Each colour carried its own temperature. Iron-hot wrath, humid decay, crystalline intellect, skin-tingling excess. Sister Sarah approached with auspex extended, scanner beams bending around the bell's rim where inscriptions spiraled in lumen gold script. "Canonical verse structure confirmed, but the canticle has evolved," she reported, stylus trembling as letters rearranged themselves beneath observation. "Not silentium tenet, ut audiatur, keep silence, that he may be heard. It reads, silentium tenet, ut ingrediatur, keep silence, that he may enter." The pylons pulsed with increasing frequency as the countdown compressed. 6 hours remaining instead of 9. The cycle accelerating with each iteration as something vast calculated optimal resonance frequency. External telemetry flooded the command net, orbital traffic drifting into formation without pilot input, Forge World machine spirits singing canticles in 4-part harmony, chronometers skipping the same seconds simultaneously across multiple worlds. Servo skulls the size of children drifted in ritual formation around the bell's base, chained with silver links that sang with harmonic frequency. They clicked out the countdown with bone clappers, empty sockets tracking our movement with attention that belonged to something else. Click, pause, click, pause, click, pause, click. Then silence where the 9th beat belonged. My teeth ached like prayer as the bell's influence expanded, reality folding around us like heated metal. Every breath carried whispers that assembled themselves into phrases shaped around my throat. "Keep silence, that he may enter through borrowed mouths." The realization struck with weight that pressed against armor like deep water. We weren't just witnessing the bell's awakening. We were becoming part of its resonance chamber. The pylons were phase tuners for impossible harmony, aligning 4 sequential wholes in causality to chaos's archetypal forces. The missing clapper wasn't absent, it was waiting. Waiting for someone to serve as the bell's voice, to speak the completion that would ring across the galaxy. The countdown reached 6 and held, stuttering as something vast in the darkness beyond considered its next move. In that moment of perfect quiet, I understood the bell's true purpose. It had been waiting for us specifically, learning our names, our voices, our capacity for silence. The bell didn't need to ring, it needed us to sing. Threnody 9 extended mechadendrites toward the nearest pylon console, neural interfaces sparking as scrap code flooded his cogitation arrays. Not the chaotic corruption I'd witnessed in demon touch systems, but something far worse. 4 voices chanting in perfect, terrible unison. Their binary cant arranged in harmonic progressions that shouldn't produce melody, yet taught him songs he'd never heard, but somehow remembered from before his flesh was blessed with steel. Noospheric communion established. He intoned through vox grills that clicked with distressed cant. The machine's spirits aren't corrupted, they're singing. 4-part harmony in retrograde causality, teaching me canticles that taste of copper prayers and old incense. His optical sensors whirred as impossible data streams flowed backward through time itself. 4-fold phase locks sought. The bell has been broadcasting across the sector for centuries. We needed power routing access. Brother Sergeant Malchus indicated a vestry door that registered as flesh warm despite hard vacuum, its bronze seal weeping condensation that curled inward like breath drawn into hungry lungs. "Breach protocol," I commanded, falling back on military procedure as reality misbehaved around us. Melter charges defeated the door with ritual precision, revealing a corridor that defied measurement. Walls curved inward yet felt vast, deck plating yielding like skin beneath ceramite boots. Environmental hazards escalated with each step. Humidity manifested as glittering ice crystals falling upward. Temperature became a thinking entity seeping through armor joints with predatory patience. The body horror peaked at the power core chamber. A dead tech priest hung crucified against the bulkhead, his mechadendrites grown into deck plating in scrollwork patterns that resembled musical notation written in flesh and steel. His organic components had calcified around neural ports, ribs fused into a resonant chamber where his heart should beat, forming a human clapper cage that clicked out the countdown with dental implants sparking against tongue stumps. Sister Dialogus Sarah approached bronze plaques lining the walls, stylus trembling as she traced canonical verses. Liturgical analysis confirms sanctification, but forbidden nomenclature has been threaded through standard canticles, she reported, breath fogging her visor in geometric patterns. The 4 aspects are named here, in the negative space between words, in the silences we were taught to ignore. Speaking these verses would invoke them through absence rather than presence. External vox crackled with hymn fragments bleeding from refineries across the orbital network. The bell's influence propagated through communication systems like a virus of silence, each transmission carrying fragments of the 4-fold chant. If the next toll reaches the Vox networks, Malchus reported, voice tight with professional unease, it will ring every receiver in system simultaneously. The stakes crystallized, catastrophic resonance cascade, every chronometer skipping the same seconds, every machine spirit learning the bell's hunger, every speaker becoming a throat for something that should never speak. Inquisitor Varro emerged from the shadows carrying a black reliquary sealed with hexagrammic locks, its surface drinking the chamber's sickly phosphorescence. He opened it with ceremonial deliberation, revealing 4 keys crafted from materials that registered as both adamant and void, each a perfect hexagram etched with the Emperor's names, arranged in patterns that made my skull ache. This is not a mission of destruction, Hale, Varro stated with clinical calm that didn't reach his eyes. There are artifacts that cannot be unmade, only turned, only bound. The Ordo Malleus seeks to cage the predator, never to trust it. His weathered face reflected the pylon's malign light. Directive A Delta authorizes extreme measures for artifacts of this magnitude. My oath of loyalty quivered like a tether line under strain. Varro hadn't come to contain the threat, but to harness it, walking a path perilously close to heresy through presumption rather than worship. Sir, the risk to sector population is acceptable, he interrupted, producing the first key. The metal pulsed with its own heartbeat, warming to blood temperature despite the chamber's killing cold. The bell will serve the throne, willingly or not. Environmental assault peaked as Varro approached the blood-crimson pylon. The smell of hot coins and vinegar threaded with old incense made saliva thick as mercury. Cold seeped through armor joints carrying metallic taste that made teeth ache with harmonic frequency, resonating through jawbone into skull. The first key rotated into its lock with metallic click that produced no echo, yet triggered a noospheric scream, not sound but evacuation, all household spirits rushing from our weapons and seals at once. Emergency lumens died, then returned with phosphorescence that cast shadows inward rather than away. Power fluctuated throughout the hulk as the countdown appeared in frost on every lens. 6 minutes remaining instead of hours, the cycle compressing as something vast learned from our actions. The bell's influence expanded with each key rotation, reality folding around us like heated metal, while servo skulls clicked out accelerated rhythm. The machine spirit is adapting to our presence, Threnody 9 reported through Vox crackling with interference shaped like whispers. It knows we're here, knows our intentions, preparing countermeasures. The blood-crimson pylon illuminated with light that smelled of iron and old victory. and I realized the bell wasn't just learning our names or voices. It was learning our plans, adapting its defenses, preparing for the final phase of an awakening centuries in the making. In the darkness beyond, something vast drew breath that lasted exactly 6 seconds, then released as pressure that made bones sing with harmonic frequency. The countdown held at 6, waiting for our next move with terrible patience. In sudden darkness that fell like a shroud over sacred ground, Inquisitor Varro's voice carried with clinical authority that brooked no dissent. Directive A Delta, he stated, each syllable placed with ceremonial precision. There are artifacts that cannot be unmade. They are to be turned, never trusted. The bell will serve the throne through hexagrammic lattice, its fourfold voice caged within the Emperor's 1,000 names. Emergency lumens returned with phosphorescence that cast shadows inward rather than away, revealing Varro's weathered face as he produced the second key from his black reliquary. The metal wept sickly green gold that smelled of sweetness threaded with rot, its surface drinking the chamber's malign light with hungry patience. "Sir, recommend immediate withdrawal and orbital bombardment," I reported, falling back on tactical doctrine as reality bent around us. Cyclonic torpedoes, virus bombs, whatever it takes to contain this threat before it propagates system-wide. "Unacceptable," Varro replied, approaching the green-gold pylon with measured steps. The bell's resonance would turn the bombardment itself into voice, every detonation becoming another throat in its choir. "We bind it here, Severin, or it sings forever." He spoke my name with casual authority, but underneath lay something else, a familiarity that tasted of copper prayers and made my teeth ache. Environmental hazards escalated beyond normal parameters. Cold became humid despite hard vacuum, breath fog curling inward like smoke drawn into hungry lungs. The countdown compressed to 6 minutes and held, waiting with terrible patience as something vast calculated optimal resonance frequency. Frost bloomed in letter shapes along chamber walls, almost readable, forming words in a script that hurt to perceive directly. "Perimeter maintenance, overlapping fields of fire," I commanded, marshalling contingencies while bureaucratic procedures dissolved around us. Brother Sergeant Malchus positioned himself at tactical advantage, bolt pistol tracking across emptiness that breathed with malevolent purpose. Tempestus Scions redistributed melter charges with mechanical precision, their movements following the countdown's cadence. 6, 7, 8, 9. Boot magnets clicking against deck seams. Sister Dialogus Sarah crafted counter-canticles from liturgical fragments, weaving the Emperor's titles around the 4 sin virtues in patterns that made my skull ache. "The binding requires specific nomenclature," she reported, stylus trembling as letters rearranged themselves beneath observation. "But the bell's influence grows with each key rotation. It's learning our intentions, turning our own devotion into its voice." Threnody 9 raised Binharic stabilizers from cogitation arrays throughout the chamber, machine spirits singing canticles in 4-part harmony that tasted of old incense and hot coins. "Hexagrammic lattice construction initiated," he intoned through vox grills clogged with ice crystals. "But noospheric cascade imminent. The bell is teaching other machine spirits its hunger through data stream, communion." The second key rotated into its lock with metallic click that produced no echo, yet triggered environmental chaos. Gravity stuttered in 6-beat rhythm, deck plating ringing with harmonics no adamant should produce. Humidity manifested as glittering ice crystals that fell upward, each drop perfect and unique, forming geometric shapes that hovered like frozen screams. Varro moved toward the cold azure pylon, and as he passed beneath phosphorescent light, he spoke again. "Aurelius, prepare the 3rd phase." The name fell from his lips like water from a broken cup, casual, unconscious, inevitable. My mother's name for me, whispered in fever dreams before the plague took her. The name buried so deep, even confession couldn't reach it, yet it rolled off his tongue, as if reading from official documentation. The violation struck deeper than any physical blow. My oath of loyalty quivered like a tether line under strain as I realized the bell hadn't just been learning our tactical intentions. It had been teaching Varro my secrets, feeding him knowledge that belonged in no inquisitorial file. The corruption wasn't worship, but presumption. The arrogance to bind chaos through bureaucratic procedure and sacred nomenclature. The machine spirits are abandoning sacred protocols. Threnody 9 reported, optical sensors whirring as impossible data streams flowed backward through causality. They're learning harmony from the bell, teaching each other songs that shouldn't exist. If the lattice fails, every cogitator in system becomes a throat for something that should never speak. Environmental assault peaked as the third key found its lock. The azure pylon illuminated with light that carried the temperature of distant stars, and I felt knowledge pressing against my skull like stylus against vellum. The smell of hot coins and vinegar threaded with old incense made saliva thick as mercury, while cold seeped through armor joints with predatory patience. External telemetry flooded the command net, orbital traffic drifting into formation without pilot input, Forge World machine spirits abandoning ignition rights to sing impossible harmonies, chronometers skipping the same seconds simultaneously across multiple worlds. The sector was already bleeding, reality fraying at the edges. The bell is not waiting for us to make mistakes, I realized aloud, watching Varro approach the fourth pylon with its pale pearl sheen promising exquisite discipline. It's guiding us toward them, teaching us to want what it wants, to speak what it needs spoken. The countdown held at 6 minutes, but the rhythm changed, no longer mechanical, but organic, matching the pulse in my temples, the breath in my lungs, the prayer I'd never spoken, but always known. In the darkness beyond the pylons, something vast drew breath that tasted of copper and old incense. We weren't binding the bell to imperial service. We were offering ourselves as its willing servants, dressed in the ritual of duty and devotion, while it whispered our true names and made us forget we'd ever had a choice. The fourth key pulsed in Varro's palm, and the countdown waited for our final act of faithful obedience. Threnody 9's mechadendrites froze mid-extension, optical sensors whirring, as impossible data streams crystallized into terrible comprehension. "The bell doesn't ring," he intoned through vox grills that clicked with distressed binary cant. "It emits." 4 sequential holes in causality aligned to chaos's archetypal forces, leaving only their unified agreement in the space between existence and void. His voice carried the weight of revelation that tasted like copper prayers and old incense. Environmental impossibility peaked as the fourth key pulsed bone pale in Varro's gauntlet, its surface drinking the chamber's phosphorescence with hungry patience. The screaming wasn't sound, but our bodies perceiving absence where sound should exist, reality rushing to fill the vacuum with phantom sensation that made teeth ache like prayer. Cold became humid despite hard vacuum, breath fog curling inward like smoke drawn into lungs that had never existed. "Each pylon is a phase tuner," Threnody continued, mechadendrites writhing as scrap code flowed backward through time itself, creating intervals where the 4 aspects can speak in unison without cancelling through opposition. Wrath, decay, change, excess harmonized through mathematical impossibility. The pylons don't generate the bell's power, they calibrate its hunger. Sister Dialogue Sarah approached the bell's rim with trembling stylus, tracing spiraling script that rearranged itself beneath observation. Here, in marginalia that overwrites canonical text, nomen sicut lingua, ubi nulla esse debet, a name like a tongue, placed where none should be. Her voice carried controlled dread as understanding crystallized. The missing clapper isn't absent. It's always a name, specifically prophesied across centuries of preparation. The twist struck with weight that pressed against armor like deep water. Pilgrim records scrolled across my retinal slate in frost that shouldn't form in climate-controlled spaces. Severinus qui veniet. Severine, who would arrive. The bell hadn't been broadcasting randomly, but calling specifically, teaching machine spirits my voice through data stream communion, preparing for this convergence of duty and prophecy. The countdown slows when you speak, Hale, Brother Sergeant Malchus observed, bolt pistol tracking across emptiness that breathed with terrible patience. Accelerates when you're silent. It's measuring your proximity to decision, not time until activation. His scarred face carried grim recognition of battles that ended in Pyrrhic victory. My chronometer flickered as I tested the theory. Speaking made the 6 hold steady, respectful as a congregation during prayer. Silence made it surge towards 7 with hungry eagerness, the bell learning my rhythm, calibrating its resonance to my very presence. Environmental hazards escalated beyond normal parameters. Gravity stuttered in 6-beat rhythm, deck plating ringing with harmonics no adamant should produce. Inquisitor Varro's plan crystallized with clinical authority that brooked no dissent. Hexagrammic lattice construction to bind the 4 aspects within Imperial nomenclature, he stated, approaching the bell with measured steps. The Emperor's 1,000 titles arranged in counter-harmonic progression, caging undivided unity through sacred bureaucracy rather than worship. His weathered face reflected the pylon's malign light. But the binding requires a focal point, someone to serve as the bell's clapper, speaking the completion from within its null space. The moral crucible settled around tactical necessity like oil-soaked cloth. To complete the binding, someone must be consumed by the very absence they created, preferably the one the bell had been calling across centuries of patient hunger. My oath of loyalty quivered like a tether line under strain as I realized Varro's corruption wasn't worship but presumption, the arrogance to bind chaos through imperial authority and sacred nomenclature. External telemetry confirms sector-wide resonance cascade, Threnody 9 reported. Optical sensors painting tactical displays with information that hurt to process. Orbital traffic forming ritual patterns without pilot input. Forge World machine spirits abandoning ignition rites for impossible harmonies. Every chronometer skipping identical seconds simultaneously across multiple worlds. The stakes crystallized with brutal clarity. If the binding failed, the bell would ring through every Vox receiver in system, turning communication networks into throats for something that should never speak. If it succeeded, the Ordo Malleus would possess a weapon that could unmake reality through bureaucratic procedure, caging the 4 aspects until someone decided to loose them again. Sister Sarah crafted counter-canticles from liturgical fragments, weaving the Emperor's titles around sin virtues in patterns that made my skull ache with geometric wrongness. The binding requires specific nomenclature spoken from within the bell's null space, she reported, stylus trembling as letters wrote themselves in frost across bronze plaques. But the speaker becomes the clapper, consumed by the absence they create. Servo skulls the size of children drifted in ritual formation, clicking out my heartbeat with bone clappers, empty sockets tracking my movement with attention that belonged to something else. The countdown held at 6, waiting with terrible patience for my decision, while frost bloomed in letter shapes along chamber walls, almost readable, forming words in script that hurt to perceive directly. External Vox crackled with fragments bleeding from across the orbital network, hymns sung backward, prayers recited in 4-part harmony by voices that belonged to no congregation, the sound of something vast drawing breath in spaces between heartbeats. The bell's influence propagated through every system designed to protect humanity from chaos. In that moment of perfect quiet, I understood the bell's true purpose. It hadn't been teaching random corruption, but preparing for imperial service, showing machine spirits how harmony could exist between opposing forces through the simple expedient of someone willing to speak the words that would cage them within the Emperor's names. The lights returned as the countdown reached 6 and held, waiting for my final act of faithful service to the Golden Throne. The team fractured along lines that had been forming since we crossed the threshold into impossibility. Brother Sergeant Malchus stepped forward, ceramite boots ringing against deck plating that sang with harmonics no adamant should produce. "Direct assault protocol," he declared, bolt pistol raised toward the bell's rim. "Melter charges, full yield. Reduce this abomination to constituent atoms before it teaches the sector how to sing in four-part harmony." "Catastrophic resonance cascade predicted," Threnody 9 interjected, mechadendrites writhing as impossible data streams painted tactical projections across my retinal slate. Explosive detonation within the bell's null space propagates through every Vox receiver in-system simultaneously. Each blast becomes another throat in its choir, turning our weapons into instruments of its awakening. Sister Dialogus Sarah clutched her rosarius until blood beaded beneath gauntlets, voice tight with controlled desperation. "The binding ritual offers containment, Brother Sergeant. Better a cage than a choir of worlds." Her stylus trembled as frost letters wrote themselves across bronze plaques in script that hurt to perceive directly. "The Emperor's 1,000 titles can hold it, but the lattice requires a focal point." Inquisitor Varro remained coldly pragmatic, his weathered face reflecting the pylon's malign light. "Directive A Delta authorizes extreme measures. The bell has chosen Hale specifically. His resonance signature matches prophecies carved in pilgrim records centuries old. Someone must serve as clapper, and it prefers the one it called." My oath of loyalty quivered like a tether line under strain as the moral crucible settled around tactical necessity. Environmental hazards escalated beyond normal parameters. Gravity stuttered in 6-beat rhythm. Condensation dripped upward from surfaces that registered as both horizontal and vertical. Cold seeped through armor joints with predatory patience. "Perimeter maintenance," I commanded, falling back on military protocol as reality misbehaved around us. Inventories checked, charges redistributed, Vox protocols maintained. The familiar rhythm of preparation provided anchor against wrongness that made teeth ache with harmonic frequency, resonating through jawbone into skull. External telemetry flooded the command net with cascading failures. Orbital traffic drifted into formation without pilot input, engines firing in patterns that resembled musical notation written in thrust vectors. Forge World machine spirits abandoned sacred ignition rites to sing impossible canticles that tasted of copper prayers and old incense. Chronometers across 3 subsectors skipped identical seconds simultaneously. The countdown flickered from 6 to 7 as the bell learned from our actions, adapting its defenses with terrible intelligence. A scion fired at a moving shadow near the blood-crimson pylon. Last round striking adamant and vanishing without flash or sound. The energy simply edited from causality like unwanted text. "The machine spirits are forming choir," Threnody 9 observed, optical sensors whirring, teaching each other harmonies that shouldn't exist, preparing every cogitator to become a throat when the bell completes its awakening. The entity is not merely waiting, it's learning our tactical responses, our fears, our capacity for resistance. My internal struggle between duty and self-preservation intensified as the phrase mutated in my mind. "Keep silence, that he may enter through borrowed voices." The bell calibrated its hunger to my very presence, learning the rhythm of my breath, the cadence of my heartbeat, the prayers I'd never spoken but always known. "Movement detected," Malchus reported, tracking across emptiness that breathed with malevolent patience. "Thermal negative. Motion sensors registering absence, moving with purpose." His voice carried the tight control of a warrior feeling reality slip beneath his boots. Varro's gaze fixed on me with clinical assessment. "The binding requires someone to speak the completion from within the bell's null space. The speaker becomes the clapper, consumed by the absence they create. Your sacrifice ensures sector stability through imperial nomenclature rather than chaos worship." "Sir," I said, bureaucratic procedure providing psychological armor against corruption. "Recommend testing lattice integrity before committing primary assets. We have a condemned Delta-grade psyker in stasis, inducted for penance, sanctioned for utility." The suggestion crystallized into tactical possibility. Varro's expression shifted from cold certainty to calculated interest. A surrogate clapper. Test the binding's tolerance for lesser resonance before risking the prophesied component. He approached the stasis casket we'd hauled through the nave like ballast. A failure given purpose. If the lattice accepts substitute voice print, I continued, we refine the binding without permanent loss. If it rejects him, we learn the bell's requirements before committing irreplaceable personnel. The words tasted of duty and desperate hope in equal measure. Sister Sarah began revising counter-canticles, weaving the Emperor's titles around sin virtues in patterns that made my skull ache. I'll braid the nomenclature tighter, less arithmetic, more adoration. The binding requires specific devotion spoken from within null space. Stabilizers to maximum, Threnody 9 voxed, raising Binharic counter-chorale from cogitation arrays throughout the chamber. Machine spirits, attend sacred protocols. Numbers cascaded backward until they spelled prayers to any mind capable of tasting calculus. Scions, prepare tether lines and emergency severance protocols, I ordered. If the surrogate begins speaking outside Imperial nomenclature, cut his connection immediately. Helion, assign maniple elements to winch operation. If the field devours metal, we haul with flesh and curse later. The stasis casket moved forward on whisper-quiet skids, frost plumes curling upward in patterns that almost spelled words before collapsing into ice crystals. The condemned psyker's eyes opened in blue fog, pupils dilating as they fixed on me with recognition that belonged to something else. I can be a bell, he whispered, voice emerging from places stasis couldn't reach. His lips cracked in lines that mirrored inscriptions spiraling around the bell's rim. The countdown held at 6, but the rhythm changed. No longer mechanical, but organic, matching the pulse in my temples as we prepared to test whether Imperial authority could cage the fourfold voice through surrogate sacrifice. In the darkness beyond the pylons, something vast drew breath and waited for our faithful service to the Golden Throne. The condemned Delta-grade psyker emerged from stasis like a prayer spoken backward, frost plumes curling from the casket in letters that almost formed words before collapsing into glittering dust. His eyes opened on blue fog, pupils dilating as they fixed on the bell, with recognition that belonged to something else. Not terror, but eager anticipation, as if approaching communion rather than sacrifice. Cables secured, winch mechanisms operational, reported Scion Tertius Caney, voice tight with professional tension as tether lines snaked toward the bell's rim like silver serpents. Kill switches armed on melter charges, emergency severance protocols ready for immediate implementation. The familiar rhythm of military preparation provided anchor against wrongness that made teeth ache with harmonic frequency, resonating through jawbone into skull. Threnody 9 chanted Binharic stabilizers, mechadendrites interfacing with cogitation arrays throughout the chamber, while machine spirits sang impossible harmonies that tasted of copper prayers and old incense. Hexagrammic lattice at 60% coherence, he intoned, through vox grills clogged with ice crystals. Stabilizers to maximum. If the field devours metal, we haul with flesh and curse later. Sister Dialogue's Sarah lit ward candles with invisible flame, their heat registering on Auspex readings while producing no visible illumination. Counter-canticles flowed from her lips, weaving the Emperor's 1,000 titles around sin virtues in patterns that made my skull ache with geometric wrongness. The binding requires specific devotion spoken from within null space, she reported, stylus trembling as letters rearranged themselves on bronze plaques. Environmental hazards escalated as we guided the psyker toward the bell's rim. Cold became humid despite hard vacuum, breath fog curling inward like smoke drawn into lungs that had never existed. Gravity stuttered in 6-beat rhythm, deck plating ringing with harmonics no adamant should produce. The countdown held at 6 minutes, waiting with terrible patience for our test of Imperial authority against chaos hunger. I can be a bell, the psyker whispered, voice emerging from places stasis couldn't reach. His lips cracked in lines that mirrored inscriptions spiraling around the bell's adamant surface, frost blooming from his mouth in geometric patterns that hovered like frozen screams. I can sing the spaces between words. Brother Sergeant Malchus positioned himself at tactical advantage, ceramite boots scoring deck plating as he tracked the psyker's movement. Movement detected beyond the bell, he reported. Thermal negative. Motion sensors registering absence moving with purpose. We lowered the psyker until his bare feet crossed the bell's lip. Sound didn't cease but inverted, creating memories of unspoken shouts and unmade prayers that pressed against our skulls like stylus against vellum. Environmental impossibility peaked. Humidity beaded on adamant despite hard vacuum. Perspiration from something that never breathed yet existed in spaces between exhalation and word. Lattice integrity holding, Threnody 9 reported. Optical sensors whirring as impossible data streams painted tactical displays. The bell is accepting the offering, calibrating its hunger to substitute resonance signature. Body horror escalated as the psyker entered the bell's null space. His jaw unhinged beyond anatomical limits, not from within, but from pressure of word-shaped absence pressing outward through flesh that remembered how to speak, but had forgotten why. Bone clicked against bone as mandibles separated from skull, creating resonant chamber where throat used to be. Sister Sarah's countercanticle wove golden rope around the bell's rim, while ward candles burned with heat that cast no light. Imperial nomenclature is containing the 4 aspects, she breathed. The Emperor's names cage undivided unity through sacred arithmetic rather than worship. The psyker's eyes fixed on me as blood and silence consumed him from within, pupils reflecting the pylon's malign light, while his lips formed my true name. Aurelius, whispered in fever dreams before plague took my mother. The name buried so deep, even confession couldn't reach it, yet it rolled off his tongue as if reading from official documentation. Severance protocols, I commanded, but the words fell into absence where sound should exist. The psyker's Vox ID blinked once on my tactical display, condemned Delta grade, then erased itself letter by letter until only emptiness remained. His body froze mid-syllable, waiting to complete a word that would never come. The bell struck, minus the completion, creating a hole in causality that registered as both present and absent on every instrument. The absence struck harder than sound could have, running through us like bolt rounds through paper. System-wide effects cascaded through external telemetry. Vox relays hiccuped across 4 bands. Chronometers skipped 6, 7, 8, 9 seconds simultaneously across multiple worlds. Orbital traffic drifted into formation without pilot input. Catastrophic failure confirmed, Threnody 9 reported, mechadendrites writhing as scrap code flooded his cogitation arrays. The surrogate lacks sufficient resonance signature. The bell rejects substitute voice print, demands the prophesied component. His optical sensors painted frost letters across my retinal slate. Severinus qui veniet. Severin, who would arrive. Where the psyker had been was nothing, not even the memory of weight. The tether hooks clacked together, unbitten. Supply manifests shuffled on the command net, subtracting rations by 1, then correcting themselves, editing their own audit logs so they had never been wrong. He was simply gone, edited from causality like unwanted text. Subject erased from all records, Malchus reported, voice like a bolt pistol in a crypt. Biosigns nil, sin record empty. The casket is ours while he never was. The countdown reset to 6 hours, confirming that only I could complete the bell's purpose. Reports flooded in from across the sector. Refineries stilled for the span of a prayer. Foundry fires burned in silence. Machine spirits sang distress calls in Benharik that tasted of fear. In the darkness beyond the pylons, something vast drew breath that lasted exactly 6 seconds, then released as pressure that made reality fold around us like heated metal. The bell had learned from our test, adapted its defenses, and now waited with terrible certainty. The entity's patience had limits, and each failed attempt brought system-wide catastrophe closer to the threshold, where even the throne couldn't contain what we'd awakened. I stepped forward with clinical resignation that settled across my shoulders, like a shroud woven from duty and prophetic inevitability. "I volunteer for Clapper assignment," I stated, the words falling from my lips with bureaucratic precision, while terror crawled through my veins like ice-cold mercury. The countdown held at 6 minutes, waiting with terrible patience as something vast calculated optimal resonance frequency through my very presence. Inquisitor Varro approached with oil that registered as both blessed and cursed on Auspec's readings, its surface drinking the chamber's phosphorescence with hungry patience. "Sacred chrism, blessed by Cardinal Ophelius VII," he intoned, though the liquid sank into my armor joints like eager humidity rather than flowing over ceramite. The oil burned where it touched flesh, not with heat, but absence, cold seeping through skin into bone while carrying metallic taste that made teeth ache with harmonic frequency. Sister Dialogue Sarah revised counter-canticles with trembling stylus, weaving the Emperor's 1,000 titles around sin virtues in patterns that made my skull ache with geometric wrongness. "Threading Imperial nomenclature through fourfold aspects," she reported, breath fogging her visor in spirals that almost formed words. "Not arithmetic, but adoration. The binding requires specific devotion spoken from within null space. Threnody 9, raised hexagrammic lattice around the bell's rim, 6 points of light and iron extending from deck seams with mechanical precision. Each point hummed at frequencies my bones recognized before my ears, counter-resonance tuned to null differentials that tasted of copper prayers and old incense. "Machine spirits attend final protocols," he intoned through vox grills clogged with ice crystals. "Lattice integrity at maximum coherence. Fire teams positioned for cable severance," Brother Sergeant Malchus reported, checking melter charge levels with professional calm, despite wrongness seeping through our hull. "Emergency scuttle protocols armed. If binding fails catastrophically, we initiate full system purge." He pressed his helm into my hands, eyes hard with recognition of battle's ending in Pyrrhic victory. "Remember the catechism of the bolt: target, range, wind, and will. Prayer is a kind of aiming." Environmental hazards escalated as preparation continued. Gravity stuttered in 6-beat rhythm, deck plating ringing with harmonics no adamant should produce. Cold became humid despite hard vacuum, condensation dripping upward from surfaces that registered as both horizontal and vertical on instrument readings. The air tasted of hot coins and vinegar threaded with old incense, metallic tang making saliva thick as mercury. "External telemetry confirms sector-wide preparation," Threnody 9 reported, optical sensors whirring as impossible data streams painted tactical displays. The Hulk superimposes over Vespera Theta orbital lanes, reality bleeding between locations. If the next toll propagates through Vox networks, every receiver becomes a throat simultaneously. I approached the bell's rim, where frost bloomed in fernwork patterns that crawled toward the absent clapper like pilgrim hands. Servo skulls the size of children drifted in ritual formation, clicking out my heartbeat with bone clappers, empty sockets tracking movement with attention belonging to something else. The countdown held at 6, but rhythm changed. No longer mechanical, but organic, matching pulse in my temples. As I stepped over the bell's lip, my bones sang with harmonic frequency, resonating through ceramite and blessed steel. The hexagrammic lattice trembled under impossible resonance, while reality folded around us like heated metal. Environmental impossibility peaked, humidity beaded on adamant, despite hard vacuum. Perspiration from something that never breathed yet existed in spaces between exhalation and word. Within the bell's influence, the 4 aspects pressed against me like physical presences. Iron-hot wrath that smelled of old victory and tasted of blood on the tongue. Humid decay promising rest in corruption. Sweet rot filling my mouth like pity made manifest. Crystalline intellect cutting filaments between possibilities. Cold azure shot through with white motes like distant suns. skin-tingling excess that bled pleasure from the eyes, pale pearl sheen promising perfection through repetition. Lattice engagement confirmed, Threnody 9 voxed from distances not measured in meters. Counter-harmonic injection stabilizing, warning, subject harmonic approaching tolerance threshold. I whispered my name into the null space, not the designation on any roster, but the true name buried deeper than confession could reach. Aurelius, I breathed. And the bell answered with 4 voices that were simultaneously one and none, each aspect harmonizing through mathematical impossibility, while my consciousness floated in spaces between words. The binding began as Sister Sarah's counter-canticle became golden rope. Threnody's stabilizers became nails. Malchus's silent prayer became brace under my ribs. Brother Sergeant Malchus screamed devotion that produced no sound, but carried meaning through vacuum, his voice reaching me as intention made manifest. External reports flooded CommandNet, orbital traffic forming ritual patterns without pilot input, Forge World machine spirits singing impossible harmonies, chronometers skipping identical seconds across multiple worlds. The bell's influence expanded with each heartbeat, teaching the sector how to sing in 4-part harmony. In darkness beyond consciousness, something vast drew breath that lasted exactly 6 seconds, then released as pressure-making reality folded around us like heated metal. The countdown stuttered from 6 to 7 as the bell learned from our binding attempt, adapting its defenses with terrible intelligence. I understood then that we weren't caging the bell. We were offering ourselves as willing instruments, dressed in ritual of duty, while it whispered our true names and made us forget we'd ever had choice in faithful service to the Golden Throne. My perspective shifts to present tense as I exist within the bell's null space, consciousness floating in geometry of pure absence, where sound goes to die and meaning takes physical form. The 4 chaos aspects press against me, not as entities, but as temperatures that burn through ceramite and blessed steel. Iron-hot wrath that smells of blood and old victory, humid decay slick with sweetness of rot. Crystalline intellect cutting filaments between possibilities, skin-tingling excess that bleeds pleasure from the eyes. I refuse to speak the completion they hunger for. Instead, I fall back on bureaucratic procedures as psychological armor, against corruption seeping through my very bones. Inventory lists become prayers against the unity they crave. Munitorum form, epsilon, ammunition ledger complete. 47 rounds Hellgun ammunition, blessed by Chaplain Mordian. 18 frag grenades, sanctified on Ophelia 7. 3 melter charges, consecrated by tech priest Dominus Vex. The familiar rhythm of supply manifests provides anchor against wrongness that makes teeth ache with harmonic frequency. The 4 voices begin to fray as I force them into conflict through drill formations and munitorum ordinances. Protocol 77 Alpha. I whisper into the null space, watching the aspects hesitate as unity fractures. All personnel will maintain proper equipment, manifest accuracy. Korn's disdain for patience wars against Nurgle's acceptance of decay. Slanesh's appetite for sensation clashes with Tzeentch's love of change over experience. I recite regulation subsections about ammunition storage, making their unified hunger stumble over administrative tedium. Sister Sarah's counter-canticle appears as golden ropes spiraling around my consciousness, each of the Emperor's 1,000 titles blazing like stars in void between heartbeats. Threnody 9's Binharik stabilizers pulse with mechanical rhythm that tastes of sacred oils and incense smoke. The hexagrammic lattice trembles under impossible resonance, while reality folds around us like heated metal. External losses mount as the binding strains against forces beyond measurement. Skitarii Alpha. 3x Helion's maniple elements are pulled into pylon light one by one, their bones spiraling like bell springs while red optics fade to black. A Tempestus Scion's tattoos, service records inscribed in flesh, fade as names are erased from reality, leaving pale skin smooth as parchment never touched by stylus. Each loss registers as phantom pain in my own body, micro-silences that feed the bell's growing strength. Lattice integrity failing. Threnody 9's voice reaches me through distances not measured in meters. The bell is learning our binding patterns, adapting countermeasures. Warning, harmonic cascade imminent across all Vox networks. His words arrive as pressure, as temperature, as directions for a map that hates straight lines. The pylons strobe out of phase, their perfect harmony disrupted by my bureaucratic resistance. Iron-hot wrath pulses with impatience, while humid decay oozes with resentment. Crystalline intellect calculates the flaw in their design as skin-tingling excess recoils from disharmony. The bell trembles, its adamant surface rippling as if struggling to maintain impossible geometry. Brother Sergeant Malchus charges through the chamber, bolt pistol barking soundlessly as red mist blooms without staining anything. His prayer reaches me as intention made manifest. Emperor, preserve us from darkness that speaks in borrowed voices. Each word carries weight that presses against my consciousness like deep water. Then, Inquisitor, Varro steps into the lattice with eyes reflecting absolute silence, revealing corruption through presumption rather than worship. The Emperor's names are ledger entries, he states with clinical authority that tastes of arithmetic rather than devotion. Sacred nomenclature to bind chaos through bureaucratic procedure. His weathered face carries the arrogance of one who believes imperial authority can cage the fourfold voice through administrative process. Sir, I respond, voice carrying through null space like prayer through vacuum. Respectfully, the Emperor's names are not mathematics, but devotion. The distinction strikes deeper than any physical blow as I realize Varro's heresy, not worship of chaos, but presumption to treat the divine as bureaucratic resource. Sister Sarah's canticle shifts as she recognizes the corruption. Her golden rope now praises a throne, with 4 legs instead of 1. The Emperor's titles twisted into patterns that invite rather than ward. The binding is inverting, she screams through Vox, crackling with interference shaped like whispers. Imperial nomenclature becoming chaos invocation. The hexagrammic lattice inverts to tetragram, 6 points becoming 4 in perfect quartered formation. Environmental chaos peaks as gravity decides where down should be and changes its mind, condensation dripping upward, while frost blooms in letter shapes that spell words in script, hurting to perceive directly. I take the simple issued blade from my belt, not a relic or blessed weapon, but standard equipment sanctified by faithful service, and cut Sister Sarah's counter-canticle rope. The golden threads part with sound like bells tolling in reverse, letting me fall deeper into the bell's null space while taking its focus with me. I offer my name not as key, but as fuse, I declare, voice carrying through vacuum while the 4 aspects turn their attention to my defiance. Let the bell learn what happens when imperial faith meets chaos hunger, not through binding or arithmetic, but through simple service to the golden throne. I speak one final thing, not my name but the Emperor's, not as title, but as plea for salvation from darkness that speaks in borrowed voices. In his name, let this end. The words carry weight that makes the bell crack with no sound, fracture emptying breath from lungs across the hulk, as reality reasserts itself through the gap between what is and what should never be. The countdown reaches 1 and holds, waiting for completion that will never come. Inquisitor Varro's corruption revealed itself not through zealous worship, but through the colder sin of presumption, the arrogance to treat the divine as bureaucratic resource. He stepped into the hexagrammic lattice with clinical authority, speaking the Emperor's 1,000 titles like entries in a ledger rather than prayers of devotion. Master of mankind, quantified. Lord of the Imperium, catalogued. He on terror, filed under Directive A Delta, he intoned, each sacred name measured and weighed for purchase against chaos rather than offered in humble supplication. The bell turned toward him with hungry recognition, its cracked surface drinking the arithmetic of faith like wine poured into sand. Where I had torn the fracture with desperate prayer, Varro's mathematical devotion began to heal it, sealing the gap with formulaic precision that made my teeth ache with harmonic wrongness. Sister Dialogus Sarah staggered as golden threads unspooled from her mouth, counter-canticles inverting mid-syllable. "The lattice! It's becoming tetragram!" she gasped, stylus snapping in her fist as frost wrote itself across bronze plaques. 4 legs beneath the throne instead of 1. He's not binding chaos. He's giving it imperial sanction. Her eyes reflected the terrible understanding that Varro's heresy lay not in worship, but in presuming to cage the fourfold voice through administrative procedure. The hexagrammic lattice obeyed the corruption, 6 points softening, while 4 sharpened into perfect quartered formation. Environmental chaos escalated as gravity stuttered between competing authorities, condensation dripping upward, while incense ash fell sideways through hard vacuum. The servo skulls pivoted as one, empty sockets fixing on Varro with attention that belonged to something else learning new words for ownership. Brother Sergeant Malchus moved before words could form, ceramite boots scoring the deck as he charged through stuttering gravity. His bolt pistol barked twice, soundless intentions that bloomed as red mist refusing to stain anything, rounds dissolving into neat erasures, cut from reality itself. "My lord," he roared without sound, "you kneel to the wrong throne." I acted with desperate precision, taking the simple issued blade that had served faithfully through a dozen campaigns, not blessed by saints or consecrated by ritual, but sanctified by duty alone. I cut through Sister Sarah's inverted canticle, golden rope parting with sound like bells tolling in reverse, then drove the blade deep into the lattice itself, severing connections between imperial nomenclature and chaos arithmetic. The bell recoiled as I fell deeper into its null space, taking its focus from Varro's presumptuous binding. Within the absence where sound goes to die, I forced the 4 aspects into argument through bureaucratic contradiction. "Munitorum form epsilon 7, I declared into the void. "Asset reclassification under emergency obfuscation clause. Strike the designation clapper from all ledgers. Note, component refuses function." Iron-hot wrath snarled at the tedium, while humid decay found it tiresome. Crystalline intellect calculated flaws in their unified design as skin-tingling excess recoiled from administrative disharmony. The bell trembled, its impossible geometry struggling to maintain cohesion, while the 4 voices argued over ownership of silence itself. "Khorne despises patience," I continued, watching their unity fracture. "Yet you require Nurgle's eternal endurance. Slanesh craves sensation while Tzeentch offers only change without experience. How can you be one when your natures war eternally?" The contradiction struck deeper than any blade, turning their strength against itself through simple logic. External reports flooded through Vox crackling with system-wide chaos. Orbital sirens muted across 3 sectors, while foundries produced ingots that existed as silhouettes of function. Chronometers skipped not just seconds but entire minutes, creating gaps in causality that registered as both present and absent on every instrument. Varro reached toward me with eyes reflecting absolute silence, his rosette spinning wildly before dissolving into ash that smelled of burnt data slates. "Severinus," he called, but the bell consumed the final syllable, then the second to last, erasing my name from his lips like unwanted text from official documentation. I spoke one final thing, not my name but the Emperor's, not as title, but as plea for salvation from darkness wearing the mask of duty. "Father," I whispered, a word I'd never dared, placing blood and ash and ledger under one sacred roof. The word carried weight that made reality fold around us like heated metal. The bell cracked with no sound, fracture leaping like lightning through adamant that had never known weakness. The split ran through null space and into the pylons, along deck seams, up into carved saints whose mouths were bells. Breath emptied from our lungs without returning, frost blooming in shapes we'd never learned to make. Across the hulk, candles burning without flame guttered in unlight. In orbit, muted sirens became blessedly useless. The countdown shattered into digits that tried to find 6, failed, chose 9, then broke entirely as something vast in the darkness beyond drew breath that lasted exactly forever. The bell hung split along an impossible line between dimensions, cracked but not destroyed, its influence bleeding through the fracture like oil through blessed water. The 4 voices fell silent, but silence itself had learned their names. In that moment of perfect quiet, I realized we hadn't contained the threat. We had taught it patience, shown it how imperial authority could be corrupted through presumption rather than worship. The bell waited now with terrible understanding, learning from our resistance, adapting to our faith. The countdown reached 0 and held, patient as death and twice as certain. Something in the darkness beyond began to laugh without sound, and I understood our victory was merely the first movement in a longer, more terrible symphony. Resolution settled across the wrecked bell chamber, like ash from burned prayers, each mote carrying the weight of what we had witnessed and failed to contain. The null cloche hung split along an impossible line that existed between dimensions, its black adamant surface bearing a fracture that registered as both present and absent on every auspex reading. The crack leaked silence, not the absence of sound, but its opposite, a presence so profound it made teeth ache with residual harmonic frequency. The 4 pylons dimmed with cracked wards, their perfect quartered formation broken by the bell's trauma. Power dissipated in stuttering pulses that tasted of copper prayers and old incense, each fade marking another machine spirit freed from the 4-fold chorus. Environmental hazards began to stabilize. Gravity remembered which direction was down. Condensation dripped in proper directions. Frost stopped writing words in scripts that hurt to perceive directly. Inquisitor Varro lay in quantum superposition across the deck plating, simultaneously alive and erased, his body existing as probability rather than flesh. His rosette spun empty on its chain. The inquisitorial seal dissolved into ash that smelled of burnt data slates and presumptuous devotion. Where his name should appear on all cogitation manifests, only gaps remained, not deletions, but spaces that had always been empty, as if reality had forgotten he ever drew breath. Brother Sergeant Malchus was gone, only a fused gauntlet marking where he had stood when the bell's influence collapsed inward like a dying star. The ceramite had melted into deck plating, forming a small shrine to duty that would outlast the hulk itself. His bolt pistol lay beside it, its machine spirit singing funeral hymns in binary that made Threnody 9's optical sensors weep lubricant like tears. Sister Dialogus Sarah moved through the chamber, with lips that shaped prayers arriving as meaning without words, her voice damaged by speaking canticles in reverse. She clutched her stylus with fingers that remembered writing, but had forgotten how letters connected to make sense. The golden rope of her counter-canticle lay scattered like broken rosary beads, each fragment pulsing with residual sanctity. Threnody 9 hummed funeral binharic for the lost, his mechadendrites performing the rite of remembrance while cogitation arrays processed casualty reports. Losses tallied, he intoned through vox grills that clicked with distressed cant. Personnel, 4 confirmed erasures, 3 quantum superpositions, 17 missing from all records. Material, 47% of blessed ammunition expended, 3 melter charges detonated without effect, 1 inquisitorial rosette dissolved. Military salvage protocols, I commanded, falling back on bureaucratic procedure as psychological armor against what we had witnessed. The bell fragments required immediate jettisoning into the hulk's core, each shard wrapped in blessed cloth before consignment to the furnaces. Scuttle charges were repositioned for final cleansing, their machine spirits singing litanies of purification in binary that almost made sense. Containment order black ash, I dictated into my mission log, voice steady despite the wrongness still seeping through corridors like oil through blessed water. Quarantine absolute, never return. Mark coordinates as spiritually hazardous. Recommend stellar immolation within the century. The familiar rhythm of official documentation provided anchor against memories that tasted of four-part harmony and borrowed voices. External telemetry showed system-wide aftermath cascading through communication networks. Across 3 subsectors, chronometers resumed normal function, but minutes were missing from all records. Sanctioned time loss declared by loyal data scribes who understood some gaps were necessary for sanity. Orbital traffic returned to proper patterns, though pilots reported dreams of singing during mandatory rest cycles. Sector-wide Vox hymn instituted, Threnody 9 reported, his mechadendrites interfacing with communication arrays throughout the hulk. Masking noise to drown the absence, 1,000 canticles on eternal loop. Every Vox receiver now broadcasts sacred songs to prevent silence from taking root. The solution felt like victory wrapped in defeat's shape, protecting the sector by admitting we had failed to truly contain the threat. Religious adaptation followed with bureaucratic efficiency. Cathedral chronometers across 4 worlds removed seconds 6, 7, 8, and 9 by ecclesiarchy edict, their mechanisms blessed to skip those numbers without acknowledgement. The faithful learned to count incorrectly to survive. Prayers adjusted to avoid the rhythm that might call something back. In the Medicae bay's quiet, I submitted to routine examination while trying not to count the rhythm my fingers tapped against the examination table. 6, 7, 8, 9. The pattern emerging unconsciously, as if my bones remembered the bell's hunger. The medical servitor noted elevated stress indicators, but found something else. Filigree etched on bone. Lattice patterns forming within my skeleton like sacred text written in calcium and prayer. The scans revealed quartered circles spiraling through my ribcage, hexagrams that had become tetragrams, geometric impossibilities that sang when I breathed and hummed when my heart beat. Within acceptable parameters for blessed personnel, the servitor declared. But I felt them resonate with each movement, heard them whisper with each prayer I dared speak. Environmental stinger manifested across distant worlds as humidity rose when the bell should have tolled, though no bell remained to ring. Frost flowers bloomed in impossible heat, their patterns matching the quartered circles we had seen carved in rust and bone. The influence had not been destroyed but dispersed, scattered like seeds across the sector to take root in silence and grow in spaces between words. The bell was not contained but transformed, carried within me like a relic I could never remove. Its influence now mobile and uncontained, waiting for the right moment to teach the galaxy how to sing in 4-part harmony through borrowed voices and faithful service to something that wore the Golden Throne's mask, while hungering for entirely different devotion. In the quiet between heartbeats, I heard it learning patience from my own discipline, adapting its hunger to imperial rhythms, while I carried its lesson deeper into the galaxy's heart, where it would grow and spread through the very systems meant to protect humanity from chaos. Final accounting begins in the austere chambers of Inquisitorial Conclave Vespera, where marble saints watch with eyes that never blink, and incense burns with flame that casts shadows inward rather than away. I stand before the tribunal of 3 Inquisitor lords, their weathered faces reflecting phosphorescence that tastes of copper prayers and old authority. Frost blooms on the rim of my water chalice despite regulated atmosphere, and the candles bend toward my breath as if listening to words I have not yet spoken. Formation losses tallied at 67%. I report with clinical precision, voice steady despite the wrongness, still seeping through my bones like oil through blessed water. Personnel: 4 confirmed erasures, 3 quantum superpositions, 17 missing from all records as if they never drew breath. Material expenditure: 47 rounds Hellgun ammunition, 18 frag grenades, 3 melter charges detonated without measurable effect. Ordnance costs calculated at 237,000 throne gelts. Human costs: incalculable. The servo skulls record every syllable, while their machine spirits sing distress calls in binary that makes my teeth ache with residual harmonic frequency. I list the dead with bureaucratic precision. Scion Tertius Caney, erased mid-step. Brother Sergeant Malchus, only a fused gauntlet remaining. Inquisitor Varro, existing in quantum superposition between life and erasure, his rosette spinning empty in stasis containment. Space Hulk Maledicta Valaris, marked as non-recoverable hazard, I continue, falling back on familiar procedures as psychological armor against memories that sing in four-part harmony. Nudged towards stellar immolation trajectory via Mechanicus tug spirits. Estimated completion within the century. Exterminatus request denied as strategically profligate by Munitorum High Command. Current status. Drifting derelict, spiritually hazardous. Recommend eternal avoidance by all Imperial vessels. Inquisitor Lord Vex adjusts his rosette with mechanical precision, stylus poised over parchment that bears watermarks of saints whose names were forgotten before the Imperium learned to count its dead. Containment measures implemented, he queries, though Frost forms letters on his breath that spell words in scripts that hurt to perceive directly. Sector-wide Vox Hymn instituted across 4 subsectors, I state, watching condensation drip upward from surfaces that should obey gravity. 1,000 canticles broadcasting on eternal loop, masking noise to drown the absence, preventing silence from taking root in communication. Systems. Cathedral chronometers blessed to skip seconds 6, 7, 8, and 9 by ecclesiarchy edict. The faithful learn to count incorrectly to survive. Prayers adjusted to avoid harmonic sequences that might call something back. Environmental adaptation cascades through my report like ripples in poisoned water. Across distant worlds, humidity rises when the bell should toll, though no bell remains to ring. On agri-worlds, frost flowers bloom in impossible heat, their patterns matching the quartered circles we witnessed carved in rust and bone. Temperature becomes a thinking entity, seeping through blessed stone with predatory patience that makes my skull ache with geometric wrongness. Physiological examination results, Inquisitor Lord Thane inquires, his augmetic eye whirring as it focuses on readings that defy every manual we've written. Medical assessment confirms filigree patterns etched within skeletal structure, I report, feeling them resonate with each breath I draw. Quartered circles spiraling through ribcage, hexagrams that became tetragrams, geometric impossibilities that sing when I breathe and hum when my heart beats. Medicae servitor classification, within acceptable parameters for blessed personnel exposed to anomalous influences. Personal assessment. The bell lives within me now, mobile and uncontained. The revelation settles across the tribunal like incense that refuses to rise. They understand what I carry. Not corruption through worship, but transformation through faithful service. The bell's influence adapted to imperial rhythms, while I become its unwitting vector into the galaxy's heart, where it will grow and spread through the very systems meant to protect humanity from chaos. The threat assessment? Inquisitor Lord Kane leans forward, her scarred face bearing marks of battles fought in spaces between sanity and duty. Not contained, but transformed, I whisper, the words emerging from places deeper than confession can reach. Dispersed like seeds across the sector, to take root in silence and grow in spaces between words. The bell taught me patience through imperial discipline, showed me how authority could be corrupted through presumption rather than worship. It learns new songs from my own devotion, adapting its hunger to bureaucratic procedure and sacred nomenclature. I sign the black ash containment protocols with stylus that trembles in my grip, each letter etched with precision that belongs to someone else learning my handwriting. The ink pools into a quartered circle before wicking straight, as if choosing not to remember the shape it tried to be. When I pause, the wall chronometer stutters toward the forbidden numbers, then leaps obediently onward while a junior scribe murmurs prayers against the rhythm. At my desk in the weeks that follow, I draft requisition forms and casualty reports while unconsciously tapping against ceramite, 6, 7, 8, 9. The pattern emerging like prayer from muscle, memory. In the quiet between heartbeats, I hear it learning from my movements, my breathing, my faithful service to the golden throne. The recording concludes as my jaw moves with gentleness of a hand guiding bell rope, and Whisper steps out wearing my voice. Keep silence, that he may be heard. The tribunal's servo skulls register 2 seconds of nothing, silence so loud it causes physical pain to anyone who hears it played back. Not absence of sound, but its opposite, presence so profound, it makes reality fold around us like heated metal. The threat has not been contained, but carried by the survivor into the galaxy's heart, where it will teach every world to sing in 4-part harmony through borrowed voices and faithful service to something that wears the Golden Throne's mask, while hungering for entirely different devotion.